Well, Mark, it's just a thrill to have you here on Win today. Welcome.
Chris, thanks so much. Good to be with you.
Yeah, and hey, before we hit record here, we were just talking about the similarity between what we're talking about today, your book, Win the Day, and my show, Win Today. Mark, we're talking about creating wins in the present moment today so that I believe we're going to have a net positive tomorrow. Here's where I want to start with the statement, though, and this is riveting. Live in day-tight compartments. Mark, take us inside and unpack that one.
Yeah, well, that comes from a guy named Sir William Osler, founder of modern medicine, gave a speech in 1913 at Yale University, and he challenged those students to live in day-tight compartments. And I won't share the whole story because it's a very nuanced, fascinating story that involved him being on an ocean liner, taking a trip across the ocean. And it's a really fascinating mindset. But interestingly enough, Chris, he also told those students, hey, I challenge you to pray a part of the Lord's Prayer every day. Give us this day our daily bread. He lived in these day-tight compartments where you make every day a masterpiece, right? You live it like it's the first day, last day of your life. And
that's a John Wooden statement, isn't it?
It really it is.
I love John Wooden. Hero.
Yeah, and it can sound like a platitude, but in the matrix in which I live and think, some very wise people said, don't worry about tomorrow.
Yep.
Take up your cross daily. Mercies are new every morning. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. Like, it's crazy how often this idea of living day to day is repeated in Scripture. And so I think it's a bigger deal than what we make of it.
It's a timeless message, essentially, that we're talking about because, here we go. Psalm 20, may the Lord God of Jacob answer you in the day of trouble. Here's Jesus. Don't worry about tomorrow. But I think, Mark, what I want to get under the hood about is asking you why this message right now?
Well, the timing's so interesting because 2020, it's been a year. Of course, I'm in D.C., so the political polarization, racial tension, and then all of that coupled with the COVID crisis has netted, about a third of Americans experiencing anxiety and depression. And it has been an exceptionally hard year. I think this is the moment to hit the reset button and to go back to basics and to really realize that we get so focused on outcomes, Chris, and it's all about inputs. Like, come on, control what you can control, and that is your daily rituals, your daily habits, and then you got to trust the outcome to God. And so I think that this book maybe is the right book at the right time as we all try to find our way forward in a new year, and I might add a new normal.
Yeah. Mark, it's something I respect about you and have respected about you for years in reading your stuff. Obviously, this is the first time we've met in person, but I tend to find that you write things that you live or have lived, like you're writing from a place of experience in your trajectory of relationship with the Lord. And I guess what I want to poke is, what's it like in D.C. right now, and what's the fever pitch in your life as a pastor of a multi-campus church, which is probably shut down right now? You're within blocks, inevitably, of the Capitol. You're in the heat of this thing. What's it like right now? Number two, then, when you assess Mark Batterson's life, how do you walk this out amidst what you're facing as a pastor, as a leader, and as an American living in this time, in this culture?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is I really do believe we are here for such a time as this and such a place as this.
Yeah.
Let's make no mistake about it. And let's remind ourselves God's got this and God's got you.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is when leaders stay calm and carry on. And it's the Stockdale paradox, right? You confront the brutal facts, but you do it with unwavering faith. And so, I had a conversation early in the COVID crisis with someone who attends our church who happens to, for many years, he worked a few doors down from the president, and he manages emergencies. I think he once slept in his office 84 nights in a row, if that gives you any idea of the kind of job he has. And he said that his mantra as a crisis manager is this. He said, I reserve the right to get smarter. Chris, I have said that 100 times in different contexts because a good leader stays humble and stays hungry and never feels like they have it fully figured out. And so I feel like this is a year where I've gone back to basics and I've lived every day with almost a rare and raw dependency upon God that I don't think could be synthetically manufactured in another situation. I think, a study I saw said that 18% of leaders feel qualified to lead right now. I'm wondering who those 18% are, because we're all past our pay grade. And so I think this is a moment to operate in a spirit of humility, but also in a spirit of faith, of exercising faith. And when you combine those two things, it helps you navigate situations like this where you come out the other side. And it's almost like going to having a trainer work you out, right? They will work out some muscle groups you didn't even know you had. These kind of circumstances, I think, have exercised leadership muscles that, all of us are sore. I'm tired, Chris. I have decision fatigue. Every once in a while, I feel like, oh, man, give me a break. But here we are. And I think if we can take it for what it's worth, man, I think these are the moments where you really grow and become the leader that you're destined to be.
Well, let's stay there because I think a lot of people, Mark, are really tempted right now. Here we are, early 2021, to play it safe from here on out because more loss Mark, it's unthinkable.
Yeah.
What do you say to that motivation?
Well, cognitively, I know that playing it safe is safe. But playing it safe is also risky. And when you count the cost, you can't just count actual cost. You have to count opportunity cost. And there is a unique opportunity cost presented to us as leaders right now with what I do, an opportunity to almost totally reinvent ourselves. I mean, Chris, I get up on Sunday mornings and I eat French toast these days because we are gathering digitally. It's like a whole different reality, but it's within that margin that now I have an opportunity to, wait, why do we do that? And is it effective? And you start asking, the why questions. And I think it can actually help us not just try to go back to normal, because I don't think that's where that's how we're gonna get where we need to go. So I know that could sound really 30,000 foot level, but I think you have to deconstruct and reconstruct your life every once in a while. So if, for example, a few years ago, I spent 2 days with a life coach. It really was about that. It was about deconstructing my life, identifying 44 life gates or defining moments that kind of help me understand who I am and then identify kind of mission statement. But you never arrive. And so this is a moment, I think, for leaders to make sure they're really dialed into who they uniquely are and their sweet spot.
Yeah, it's really interesting you said exactly that, because one of the things I think I'm so passionate about here on Win Today is that we'll never know what to do in life until we know who we are. It starts with identity. So it's almost like we don't know how to aim our life to win the day without first knowing who we are. And it almost requires, a lot of people have been saying, Mark, 2020 was not an interruption. It was a disruption of everything. So now how do we pivot? Oh, I hate that word. Sorry, guys. I don't mean to use that word again. That's become a 4-letter word.
Yeah.
It's got to start with identity. So I think to that, and it's so funny, for people watching us on YouTube right now, they can see behind you the plethora of books. Being able to reflect requires us to remain a student in life. Mark, I think I heard you say that you read 500 books before you ever wrote one. Is that the right number? Something like that?
It's a little bit north of that, Chris.
Wait. How many?
Okay, so I felt called to write at 22.
Yeah.
And it was at that same time I took a graduate assessment that showed a low aptitude for writing. In other words, writing is not a natural gifting.
Okay.
And so I knew I would have to read and reverse engineer books if I was going to really fulfill that calling. So I read 3,000 books before I wrote one. But
oh my word.
I mean, that was over 13 years, Chris.
Yeah.
And I know that if you do the math, that's me reading a couple hundred books a year. And some people say there ain't no way. There's no way you read that many books. Well, early on, I was pastoring a church of 19 people. So I had some time on my hands. And we didn't have social media.
Yeah.
We spent 142 minutes on social media, the average person. You buy back 2 hours and 22 minutes, and you tell me how many books you can read in your spare time. So wow. I think it really comes down to how you manage those margins in your life, and might as well have a little bit of fun with it. Put a book in your bathroom, and everybody can read a book a month, and some of you have more potential than that.
Yeah. No, it's really good, Mark, because I'm looking behind you and I'm seeing this stack of books, and what it tells me is, number one, you're a voracious reader, but number two, there's something inside of you that says, I don't know what I don't know, and I think that's one of the drill down principles I want to talk about as we dive in. We'll get into the content of the book here in a moment, but guys, I think we have to realize that we don't know what we don't know, and Mark, what I heard you say in that moment is for us to be able to hit pause, to reflect, to reassess, we have to be willing to look at our blind spots, to ask someone to tell us about those blind spots, but then to dive in and do the proactive work of learning. Is that anything else?
Yeah, that's so good, Chris. I like to do the math on things because I find that it gives me a concrete example, because everybody knows leaders are readers, but that's lost on us. And so,
sure.
Early on, I read that the average author puts about 2 years of life experience into a book. And so I remember thinking to myself, well, if I read 250 books this year, I'll only be a year older, but I'll gain 500 years of life experience.
Oh.
And so, when people ask me how old I am, sometimes I just jokingly say, about 9,000 years old. I love reading biographies, especially because of that identity piece that you bring up. Mm-hmm. In cybernetic theory, first order change is changing your behavior. It's doing something more or less. And that's fine if you're trying to lose weight or run a marathon. That works. Mm-hmm. But second order change is where there's the payoff. It's the cognitive. It's telling yourself the right story, which ironically is the first habit and win the day. You got to flip the script.
That's it.
And so if you don't like your life, I mean, there's a good chance it's because you're telling yourself the wrong story. And so it really starts right there.
Well, Mark, you just set me up, because we have a tendency, you wrote in the book, to remember that which we should forget and forget what we should remember. Teach that out a bit. Yeah.
Well, you can get 100 reviews on your podcast, or get 100 reviews on a book, and 99 of them are positive and one is negative, and wow, that one really gets stuck in your mind and in your spirit. And so, studies have shown that our aversion to loss is greater than our desire for gain. And so there's this built-in psychology within us that if we don't find a way to redesign our default system, we do play it safe. In other words, we play not to lose. And it just is not the way that God intended. And so the interesting thing to me is we're only born with two fears, fear of falling and fear of loud noises. Thousands of fears, but that means every other fear is learned, which it means every other fear can be unlearned. And so I think half the battle is unlearning these fears. And so then the question is, well, how do you unlearn a fear? Well, you know what? Sometimes it has to happen to you, the thing that you fear. So you discover that, guess what? You can get back up and live to fight another day. You know, the cure for the fear of failure is not success. It's failure in small enough doses that you build up an immunity to it. And so,
whoa, you got to say that again, Mark. I've never heard that, but I want to double click on that. Sure. Say that again, if you would.
Okay, let's double click it. The cure for the fear of failure is not success. The cure for the fear of failure is failure in small enough doses that we build up an immunity to it. And so I'm a failed church planter, Chris. My first attempt at planting a church was a failed attempt. And it was embarrassing. It was disillusioning. But I'm so grateful because it totally changed my perspective going into it a second time. And so I think sometimes we have to experience what we fear to realize that, you know what, God doesn't love us any less. He's going to dust us off. We're going to get back up and we're going to learn from it and become better because of it.
What you just said there, I think gives context for me. When I read the book, and it's such a great book, especially to start this year, guys, again, Win the Day, 7 Daily Habits to help you stress less and accomplish more. I'll have a link in the show notes at wintoday.tv/episode 227. Go get a copy of this book today. But Mark, what you just said gives context to what you wrote. You said your explanations are more important than your experiences. Your stories are more important than the situations you found yourselves in. You preface that by saying if your life isn't what you want it to be, it's because of those things. Anything else we should know about exactly that before we move on?
I just think let's step back for a minute, Chris, and recognize how amazing it is that God has given us this metacognitive capacity. It's the ability to think about how we think. And the key to our meta-narrative is this metacognitive ability. And I think the technical term is cognitive reappraisal. It's telling yourself a different story. And now, listen, I'm not the kind of guy that, this is not Stuart Smalley, okay? This is not good enough, smart enough, and not people like me.
Right.
This isn't just a Jedi mind trick. This is literally the way that the human mind has been designed, and even the fact that we can't differentiate between what is really happening and what we're visualizing is a testament to the mind's tremendous capacity to envision good things. Unfortunately, it can be used in the opposite way as well. We've got to really harness that ability to, it's part 3 of the book. It's imagining unborn tomorrows. And it is this tremendous gift that each one of us has been given. And can I say one more thing?
You can say 20 more things.
Because, Chris, there are people listening who are saying, yeah, that's great. You're talking about imagination, but I'm not creative. Okay.
Go there.
I don't know anybody who isn't creative when it comes to making excuses. All of us are creative when it comes to making excuses. And so what I would say is we've got to repurpose that creativity so that we don't make excuses. We don't take shortcuts. We literally don't even give ourselves an out. And I want to be careful here because there is something called a Nazarite vow in Scripture. And you better be careful when you're making vows. Like you don't want to just think about it. You want to pray about it. You want wise counsel. But Chris, you and I both know until you sign up for the marathon, right? Until you apply for the graduate program, like until you take the first step, like it's a figment of your imagination. So you've got to find a way then to kind of take that first step towards whatever it is that ultimately you want to accomplish. And we'll just use this year as an example, 2021.
I love that, because what that presupposes is that, guys, many of you have tried the resolutions. Many of you have read the books. Many of you have bought the goal setting programs, and either you've not finished them or you've finished them and flailed out. But Mark, to what you said, I think what this comes down to is for people to win the day, to win today. See how I just used both of our platforms?
I like
it. We have to be willing to do the work of creating new neural pathways, because the million times more powerful subconscious mind is going to go down the path of least resistance, the neural pathways of defeat, of victimhood, of complacency. So we'll get a book like Win the Day. We'll get a program. We'll assert ourselves in an area of improvement. It won't work, and we'll say, well, that must have just been snake oil, or that didn't work. And I'm saying, no, guys, listen, please lean into this. The change that we need starts on the inside, and what Mark said is, guys, essentially we have to be willing to carve new paths within our being to say, hey, I'm gonna do the work to get it done. And so
we are cut from the same cloth, Chris, because those neural pathways, I think and I know enough neuroanatomy to be dangerous, and so I want to say that up front.
Me too.
But I think my favorite part of the brain may be the reticular activating system.
Yes,
it's this cluster of brain cells at the base of the brainstem that, it determines what we notice and what goes unnoticed. And so until you set the goal, like you just don't even notice the opportunities to take steps in that direction. And so I think you won't accomplish 100% of the goals you don't set. And so big believer in that. The only thing I would add is then you have to take those goals and you do have to reverse engineer them into daily habits.
That's it.
And so Chris, my challenge this year, I always try to have either a challenge or an adventure, hiking the Grand Canyon rim to rim, or running a marathon, or swimming the Escape from Alcatraz, or something that kind of pushes me physically or spiritually or sometimes mentally. And I'm curious if you have one of those this year as well. Is there anything that's on the docket?
Mark, for me, yes, there is. It starts with taking an absolute ice cold shower every morning, and I'm working my way up to 3.5 minutes. It's huge, because going into it, there's a level of mental toughness, and I'm doing some deep breathing in it, but man, it has been a game changer for me. So that's actually it for me.
Wow. And you know what I love about that, Chris, is one, the simplicity. And two, I mean, that's one of the best examples of habit number 3, eating the frog, that I've heard.
Yes.
Now can we just keep it real? I think I am a hot shower guy. I am a hot shower guy.
Oh, me too.
But I love the fact that, it's identifying what that goal is and then making it measurable and somehow making it meaningful too. So I think for me this year, I'm going to bike a century, but my training is going to be kind of fun. My son lives in California. I live in DC. It's 2,341 miles. And so what I did is I took those miles and I reverse engineered it, do the math, and I'm going to ride that many miles. I'm going to basically ride across the country, either on a stationary bike or my bike, to prepare for that bike century. And so, you've got listeners. I know who you're talking to. You're talking to people who are motivated. go-getters, maybe some type 3 on the Enneagram, some performers, achievers. And I think it's as simple then as you gotta make that plan and then work that plan. And no better time to do it than I think even at the outset of a new year.
Yeah, that's really good. And to dive in back into the content of the book, one of the statements from your book, Mark, that was so meaningful for me and such a challenge at the same time is that the obstacle is indeed the way. But a lot of people are signaled by obstacles like, oh, I need to take another route. So what's your advice?
Yeah. Habit number 2, kiss the wave.
That's it.
And it sounds really almost metaphysical, but Charles Spurgeon said, you have to kiss the wave that throws you against the rock of ages. That's a profound statement. A couple of years ago, my wife was diagnosed with cancer. And Chris, you have a history with this. It's painful. It's difficult. Few things are harder to fight. Laura, my wife, read a little piece of a poem. It was a question that totally was a paradigm shift for her. And the question was this: what have you come to teach me? Now, that's a hard question to ask of difficult circumstances, because we want to get out of those circumstances. And because we want to get out of them, we rarely get anything out of them. And so it's this idea of, what is the character that needs to be cultivated? What is the lesson that needs to be learned? And if I take that approach, then I've kissed the wave. And you do that enough, and before you know it, you'll actually surf the wave. And I'm not talking in a vacuum.
Right.
Listen, I've had near-death experiences. I have my bumps and bruises from leadership like everybody else, and I have my fair share of failures. It's in kissing the wave and embracing those obstacles that I think we really become the person that we were meant to be.
I mean, guys, real fast, I'm gonna just give you a flyover of the 7 habits here. Number 1 is Mark reference, flip the script. Number 2, kiss the wave. Number 3, eat the frog. Number 4, fly the kite. Number 5, cut the rope. We'll talk about that here in a moment. Number 6, wind the clock. And number 7, seed the clouds. Mark, I want to talk to the person who was winning in their everyday life, but now, especially in 2020 last year, with the disruption that 2020 was, they're so thrown off their game and their rhythm, and now the things that once defined them are draining them. Like, maybe talk to them through the lens of those habits.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's an opportunity to reevaluate and reprioritize. Chris, I sometimes say, I'm still not sure what I want to do when I grow up. For example, I've got a film script that I've been shopping for 2 years. In fact, I tell the story of Runner's World called him the greatest runner of all time, Emil Zatopek. Very few people have ever even heard his name. He won triple gold in the Helsinki Olympics. And if it's the last thing I do, I'm going to make a movie about his life. In fact, I read his biography as I was training to run a marathon myself. I think maybe this is an opportunity to step back and really make sure that we're winning at the right thing.
Wow.
It's so easy to, like, I don't want to be a success at the wrong thing. And for me, at the end of the day, I want to be famous in my home. Success is when those who know me best respect me most. I have to remind myself of that all the time, because otherwise I'll put my time and energy into things that, they may help the bottom line bank account, but that's not at the end of the day. Yeah. It all goes back in the box. And so, I want to make sure that my best time is devoted to the most important things. And so maybe COVID is that opportunity to reevaluate a little bit and even rediscover and reinvent what the next 5, 10, 20 years are going to look like. And we're actually going through that process right now. You know, we're one church with 7 campuses, but we have a coffee house, we have a movie theater, we have a DC Dream Center, and right now we're building out a city block a mile from the Capitol that'll be a marketplace, co-working space, child development center. It's when it's said and done, it'll be $100 million project. So I'm talking about big dreams.
Yeah.
But here's the question I ask myself. Is it going to make a difference 70 years from now? Because we think right here, right now, I think God is thinking nations and generations. We think that what God does is for us, but it's always for the third and fourth generation. He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
That's so
and
good.
So we've got to think third generation. And so Chris, in a weird way, because this was totally unplanned, I feel like that's a word for someone today, just beyond a good idea. I feel like that might be a God idea that someone needs to really reevaluate and think third generation. You know, maybe it's a family business, or maybe even, you know, your mid-career, but you probably aren't doing what you want to be doing. And you've got 20 years here to either play it safe and do what you've been doing and then kind of check out, or maybe this is the moment. You know, I think David Brooks calls it the second mountain, to climb a second mountain, or the language of going from success to significance, kind of that halftime Bob Buford language. I bet there's more than one of us who find ourselves in that kind of situation today.
Connect winning the day, winning the present moment, to the concept of being multi-generational in our approach. I personally believe that when we win today, when we win the day in which the Lord has given us, it builds a repository of resources from which, when we step into tomorrow, we can add to it, we can make significant withdrawals, and all of a sudden now we're experiencing the compounding nature of of long obedience in the same direction. Any thoughts to that?
Yeah, don't you love how Albert Einstein called compound interest the 8th wonder of the world?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we think finances, but I think the best application is actually habits. It's the compound interest of daily habits. And so what habits are going to be the high leverage points, ranging from your long-term health to your long-term mental health, to your long-term spiritual health and emotional health and relational health? What are those things? And one simple example, you know, you write a book, people think you know more than you do, and you get invited to go speak places, and it can go to your head, Chris. Yeah. And early on, I was taking every invitation I got, and I was spread so thin that, man, I was sacrificing my family in ways that were contrary to what I really believe. And so I had to set a boundary that I'm not going to do more than 7 overnight speaking trips a year, period. I don't care what it is. I don't care what the honorarium, the speaking fee is. Like, no. Yeah. You have to establish some boundaries in place. And so I think you're right. It's about managing today and doing it in a way that it's going to pay more and more dividends down the road. And I know that's easier said than done, but I hope everybody's encouraged, because win today and win the day it sounds so simple, but it doesn't matter what goal you're going after, what problem you're trying to solve, what habit you're trying to build. There's just no other way to do it. And the good news is you do it 2 days in a row, and I think you call that a winning streak. And so 2 ice cold showers, bam! Now you've got a winning streak. Do your age and sit-ups 2 days in a row. Okay, now you have a winning streak. Write 200 words a day. Yeah. Okay. Now you have a winning streak. You do all of those things, you're going to be a different person in a year than you are today.
Mark, I've got a huge heart right now for people who are tuned into this and are excited about this message, But truth be told, they're on the edge of burnout. Maybe they are experiencing burnout. I'd love to hear your thoughts and advice on burnout and how to heal from it. And just to be really candid, in 2020, that was creeping up hard on me because I had run so hard and so fast, and then the disruption and the disruptive nature of how life came, oh man, it pulled the rug out.
Yep, no doubt.
Like that could be an encumbrance to people winning the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Burnout is real. Yeah. Decision fatigue is real. Those mental health issues are not a figment of your imagination, but also you're not alone. 1 out of 3 people dealing with depression and anxiety. I think I would say a couple of things. One is if you need to, go see a counselor. I saw 2 different counselors this past year because I need someone who has an outside perspective to help me process some of the stress that I feel in a leadership role where it gets lonelier and lonelier, Chris. And it gets harder and harder. Now, I would say that the blessings of God will complicate your life, and we could double back to that if we want to talk about that. But I would say, one, you need some wise counsel, whether it's a licensed counselor. I also have a spiritual father who is 78 years old, and I call him and tap into his wisdom all the time. And so that's key. The other thing I would say is, and I'll put on my pastor hat for just a moment.
Yes.
The only ceiling on your intimacy with God and impact on the world is daily spiritual disciplines. And so I think you've got to be grounded in God's word. And so to me, a daily Bible reading plan is a lifeline for me. A few minutes of meditation, that'll get you a few miles down the road. And then prayer is the difference between the best we can do and the best God can do. And so I think it's practicing some of those spiritual disciplines. And honestly, it's just going back to basics. Like, you never outgrow those simple things. And so if you're listening, you find yourself in one of those places, discouraged, burned out, go back and do some of those things that will make all the difference in the world. Hey, I'll throw one more in for good measure.
Bring it on.
According to a NASA study, a 26-minute nap increases productivity 34%. It's one of my favorite studies. And so I'm having a little bit of fun right here, but sometimes burnout is because we aren't getting the kind of rest that we could or should. And so I actually wear a wedding ring. It was a gift from my wife that has those infrared sensors in them that tells me resting heart rate, deep sleep, respiratory rate.
Oh, that's awesome.
She loves me, Chris. What can I say?
Laura's a good wife. Yeah.
So every day it gives me a readiness score, and it helps me be dialed into physiological metrics that I wouldn't even think twice about. And so the most important things in life are the hardest things to measure. And one example, chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. The first tenet of the Westminster Catechism. How much are you enjoying God? I'm not even sure how to measure that, but I would say that it is the best metric when it comes to your spiritual maturity. And so getting back to a place of actually enjoying God the way that he enjoys you would be a good place to start to kind of begin that rest and recovery process.
Mark, go back to what you were just alluding to about the ring and your sleep and your restedness. I personally believe that the day begins at night. I just think stuff happens when we set ourselves up for a good night that establishes a good morning. I'd love to hear maybe some of your hacks, your routines, your rhythms, or even just general thoughts about that principle.
Yeah, it's so good. Confession isn't just good for the soul, it's good for sleep. You'll sleep a little bit better at night if you just kind of offload those things from the day that you need to let go of. And even a little bit of meditation. I know that the mind is mysterious and we have weird dreams. All of us do. But I also know that your last thoughts of the day are often the thoughts that will dictate some of those dream patterns that happen. And so don't just count sheep, count blessings. And Chris, you nailed it. I mean, this goes all the way back to Genesis 1. The ancient rhythm with which God created us was evening and morning the first day. And so we get it backwards. We think that the day starts when we wake up, but you're absolutely right. Nothing dictates how the next day will go as much as good sleep or lack thereof. And so crazy to think about it, but I think it's actually a stewardship issue as well. And in fact, do you know, my wife and I, fun fact, now we're having fun.
Yeah.
Might be TMI, but
I love it.
All these mattress companies have, you try them on a trial basis. We tried, it wasn't until our fourth mattress, it took like a year to find the right mattress that would help both of us kind of maximize our sleep. The average person is going to spend 33 years in bed.
Whoa.
So maybe, just maybe, it's worth a few extra dollars to make sure that, and you don't have to go out and buy the most expensive. That isn't always the best one, but you have to figure out what is going to help you get the kind of rest that you need to make sure you have the kind of energy that you need.
They're not giving either of us money for saying so. What did you guys land on?
Oh, man. Wow. How can my mind go blank right now? It's the, oh, man. It's not the fancy sleep system. It's
Casper?
Oh, man. Chris,
That's okay. I was just curious.
I bet by the time we're done, I will remember.
That's awesome.
See, we tried so many.
Yeah.
We tried so many that I can't even pull it out of my hat, but maybe by the time we're done.
It's all good. Well, what I think is humorous about that is, number one, companies just being willing to allow people to try things like mattresses. But I think details matter. And you talked about this in the book, and I'm just going to pivot off of that because you talked about sweating the small stuff. What was it?
I remembered.
Go ahead.
Leesa. Leesa.
I've heard those are great mattresses.
And here's this is so funny.
Yeah.
I have a little connection. Kirk Cousins, of course, now is the quarterback for the Vikings, but he read In a Pit back when he played for Michigan State, and he played for the Redskins here. And so we got to know each other.
Go green, go white, baby.
So he represented Leesa Mattress when he was here, and actually orchestrated like us giving away 100 mattresses through our Dream Center. So I feel so bad. I should not have forgotten the name of that mattress company, because they pulled us a favor through the Dream Center. So little shout out to Kirk Cousins and to Leesa Mattress.
Go green, go white. Yes. That's awesome. Mark, spend some time on sweating the small stuff. I laughed out loud when I read that in the book because I do. I'm an Enneagram 1. I am so driven. I sweat the small stuff and the details about the details. I have lists for lists. Details really matter. It's how I win the day. In your experience, though, is that wise to sweat the small stuff? I think it is, but at which point do we, spend $1 to save a dime, if you will?
Yeah. And that's a great way to phrase it. I think that mindset is the key. But I would say that, the devil is not in the details. God is in the details. 12 chapters in the book of Exodus are devoted to the aesthetics of the tabernacle, the color of the curtains, the exact ingredients for the incense that would stamp the olfactory nerve and help create sacred memories and moments, what the priest would wear, all of the routines and rituals involved. I mean, some people would look at that and say that's a little bit of overkill. I think the message there is those details are actually significant, and that if we can get the little things right, it helps us do the big things much better. In fact, how you do anything is how you'll do everything at the end of the day. And so I think creating these environments, I love this idea of nudge, the fact that we're choice architects, and we've got to engineer environments that maximize our creativity, our productivity, even our spirituality. And so listen, if it helps you focus your prayer to light a candle, then light a candle.
Do it.
If it helps you to kneel, or if you're like me and you actually need to walk and pray to kind of stay focused, then do that. But you have to figure out those little details of the way that you're wired. And it's funny, Chris, because a lot of it has to do with whether you're that type 1 perfectionist. Yeah. I'm a type 3 performer. Okay. And if you're a type 7 adventurer or a peacemaker type 9, whatever it is, like, you have to know the way that you're wired. And that will then help you, I think, kind of engineer the right environments.
Oh, that's good. That's really good, Mark. Well, hey, we're in an incredibly divisive culture today. We started our conversation with that. I want to go back to that for a moment. How do these principles, these 7 habits, equip us to navigate the tension at hand and even deal with things like cancel culture and walking on eggshells, proverbially?
Yep. Well, the first thing I would say is we're the peacemakers, grace givers, and tone setters. I think it's so critical that we do not react to what's happening in culture. There is so much baiting and trolling, and you got to figure out how to fly above that. I made a decision a long time ago it's Proverbs 16, that the man who overlooks an offense, it's to the glory of a man who overlooks an offense. In other words, don't take offense. You've got to find a way to not be reactive, but to really be proactive. And so I think what the 7 habits do is they put the focus back on us. Chris, I've led every kind of person under the sun. Since we talked about Enneagram, I've led every number. I've led every letter in the Myers-Briggs. I've led every kind of strengths finder. Yeah. I can tell you the hardest person I've ever led is the guy that looks back at me at the mirror every single morning. So it always starts there. It's about leading myself well, so that if I'm winning the day, then I'm going to bring a lot of people along with me for the ride. If I'm eating the frog and I'm exercising this daily discipline of doing the hardest thing first, and in your case it's the ice cold shower. Yeah. Well, guess what? Then the hard conversations you have later in the day, I can handle this. I spent 3.5 minutes in an ice cold shower. So it really is. Then it's operating out of the overflow of what's happening in our life. And now we're flipping blessings for other people, and we're living generously. And, this might be a good place for us to kind of land the plane. Yep. Can I share one thing that I have a mentor, my spiritual father? He said there are 2 kinds of people in the world. One kind of person walks into a room and says, "Here I am." It's all about them. Their ego barely fits through the door. The second kind of person walks into a room and says, "There you are." It's about everybody else. It's about, how can I add value to your life? How can I love you even if you're my enemy? How can I pray for those who persecute me? How can I bless those who curse me? When you have that kind of mindset, and that's the mindset, if you follow Jesus, if you're part of the Jesus way, well, then that's what we're called to. It's about being a blessing to the people around us. And so may the world have more "there you are" people.
Oh, Mark, that is exactly the perfect place to land this plane. Again, folks, the book, Win the Day, 7 Daily Habits to Help You Stress Less and Accomplish More. go grab a copy right now over at wintoday.tv/episode 227. He is Mark Batterson. Mark, what a joy to have had you here with me today. I've loved this conversation.
Chris, you've had, I think, 227 episodes, and I have no idea where this one ranks for you. I have a lot of conversations like this. I love your heart, love your spirit. Thanks for leading the way that you do.
Thank you.
And just on a fun note, great minds do think alike. Yeah. So Wonder Twin powers activate.
Let's go.
Win the day.
Win today.
Yes, I love it.
Let's go. Let's go. Hey, where can people connect with you? Obviously the church, but is there any other place you'd like people to go in the way of this message?
Yeah, absolutely. MarkBatterson.com. And folks can find sample chapter of Win the Day, as well as a trailer and some resources, 7 steps to setting life goals, as well as 100 life goals that I've set that I put there on the website. And then on all of those normal social media outlets, I'm just at Mark Batterson.
That's so good. Mark, thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Chris. Blessings.